Thanks again to everyone who's here tonight. I'm Lisa Halverstad. I'm a reporter for Voice of San Diego, and I'm the secretary of the San Diego chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists. And we have a great panel here tonight to talk to us about police cameras. We have Margaret Dooley Samueli, who is policy director for the ACLU San Diego and Imperial Counties. Brian Marvel, who is president of the San Diego Police Officers Association, the local police union. Victor Torres here, who is a criminal defense attorney and a board member of San Diego La Raza Lawyers Association. Leichala Wilson of the NAACP San Diego branch, where she serves as president. She recently retired from the San Diego County Public Defender's Office. And of course, Shelley Zimmerman, the police chief in San Diego, who spent almost 32 years with the San Diego Police Department. And we'll start with a broad question for Chief Zimmerman. Chief, can you tell us briefly why the San Diego Police Department started using police body cameras, how many there are, and generally what the rules are for using them?
Yeah, I'd be happy. Everybody hear this? I guess you can now. Okay. Better? Okay, there we go. I don't know if there's microphone or not. But, you know, we've had a few of our officers over the last several years that have made the terrible decision to discredit our badge, dishonor our noble profession. And that is not representative of the vast majority of our officers that serve every day with honor, distinction, dedication, personal courage, professionalism. And I am a huge proponent in complete support of body-worn cameras because of community trust. And it takes years to build up that community trust, and in just moments, that trust could start to erode away. And with those officers, with the misconduct, that trust started to erode away. So, yes, we have right now 300 cameras that are deployed on officers at 3 of our divisions, and that would be Central Division, Mid-City Division, Southeastern Division. We are about ready to start the training to roll out the next 300 cameras, and those next 3 divisions are going to be Southern Division, Western Division, and Northern Division. The goal is to have all of our officers who work patrol in uniform to have body-worn cameras by the end of next year.
And under what officers have to record?
Can you hear? Okay, right now. Okay. The policy of right now is that officers must record all enforcement contacts. And so let me explain to you how the camera works. When the officers go into service, they put the camera on. And the camera is always on a 30-second buffering loop. Once the officer makes an enforcement contact. That could be a traffic warning, traffic citation, an arrest, a field interview, any type of enforcement contact, the officer is required to record that contact. And once the officer hits the record button, the buffering loops back to those 30 seconds prior and captures that, and then continues to record until the enforcement contact is over.
And everyone, do you generally support the use of cameras? When do you think they make sense? We'll start with Victor here.
I think most people support the use of cameras. The tricky part is how do you implement them? What is the policy going to be? And how are the people who actually have to implement that policy going to be trained in that policy and then held accountable to stay with that policy?
On behalf of the NAACP San Diego branch, I am in support of the cameras. I think it's important, and I think it's about time. The problem that we have from the community, of course, is incidents of racial profile. I believe the data has already shown that it's not perception, that it is real. Okay, I'll start over. Okay. On behalf of the NAACP San Diego branch, we are in full support of the cameras, and the question we have is, why did it just start now? The community is very concerned about racial profiling, and I think the data has shown that it's not just perception, it's reality. So we're hoping that these cameras will help not only community members when they believe they've been racially profiled, but if there's evidence there, we need that evidence.
Similarly, the ACLU does support police cameras. The ACLU generally has a position against increased surveillance, but this is a little bit different because we are all under intense surveillance. This is different because it provides some level of accountability of the officer's action as well. So it's an accountability measure for the government itself. So there's the potential here for very good public benefit, but as Victor said, it's really got to be a policy needs to be put in place that protects issues, that addresses issues like privacy, that addresses notification, are residents informed that they're being videoed, and to make sure that we really have the benefit on both sides. Not just the surveillance benefit for law enforcement, but the accountability benefit to the public. And that really goes to the policy itself and how officers are trained and held accountable to stick to that policy.
We were in support of it. We recognize that the new technology is always coming forward for law enforcement. Even when I came on 15 years ago, we were using these really antiquated MDTs. They were very difficult to use. And as technology advanced, now we have very sophisticated computers in our cars right now. So the body cameras, I think, is just an evolution in law enforcement of technology that is going to be utilized. I think we're on the cutting edge in the United States and rolling out for a very large department on the body cameras. I think it'll be very beneficial for the officers working in the field. A lot of the concerns that we have are officers getting hurt while in the performance of their duties. I think with the body cameras, we're gonna see probably a de-escalation and use of force. I think people are actually going to see the stuff that officers go through in the performance of their jobs. Unfortunately, TV and Hollywood have glamorized law enforcement to where nobody actually really gets hurt, and that's not the truth. Unfortunately, law enforcement and the performance of our job, it's not pretty, and it's not the way it is done on Hollywood and TV, and I think people will start seeing that in these videos. So we are in support of it. There is some issues that we want to continue to work out. And the agreement that we made with the city and with the department was that we would review the policy and procedure every 6 months, just to make sure if there's issues that arise that we can address it, we can look at it, and we can make adjustments. Because I think this is going to be one of these policies that's a living document in law enforcement.
Margaret, I wanted to drill into something that you had said about privacy. Who do you think should be able to view this footage?
So, in general, these videos should not be made available to the public. The interest is in protecting the privacy of the officer and the individual. These videos are available as evidence in criminal cases, civil cases, and complaints, and administrative complaints. If a video is going to be made public, that should only happen when there is a real public interest in that happening. So, for example, there is no public service provided by releasing a video of someone looking silly during a sobriety check. There's no public service provided there. But there could be public interest in a video of a particularly contentious incident where maybe community concerns are boiling, or the department might feel that if they release a video, it helps them demonstrate that an officer was behaving well and to sort of quell concerns and address them head on. Could be to show that the officer did not behave well and that the department is taking it seriously, they're transparent, and they're going to address it. But it really is a balance. There's no formula, but what would be helpful for the community, I think, is to understand the criteria by which the department will be deciding or evaluating when a video serves, when the release of a video might serve public good. And right now, we don't have that, and that's something that we may get some, there may be some practice at working out in the next few months.
No, Voice of San Diego, my employer, did request footage from 2 police shootings, and we were not able to get that footage. Can you explain, Chief Zimmerman, why that footage was not released?
The video footages are considered evidence, and at this point in the policy, I don't plan to release any of the video with it because it is considered evidence. I found your comments very interesting as far as what you talked about, that they shouldn't be released, and you agree with that, but for the public good of something that was very contentious, that could be something of public safety, that is something that I would consider to take a look at. But overall, the policy is not that we would release it. So I appreciate very much your comments.
But at the same time, if the purpose of getting the cameras was to increase transparency and public trust, so as you had talked about at the time that you and former Chief Lansdowne had proposed that there be cameras, there was sort of a hail of concern about police misconduct and racial profiling. How is it not then kind of a situation where you're expecting the public to trust you and your internal controls that some may think might have not been strong enough at the time you proposed that you add the cameras?
I appreciate that question very much. The officer, again, for all enforcement contacts, if a complaint comes in, if we get a complaint that goes to internal affairs, then the investigator from internal affairs will have an opportunity to view the video. I would imagine also the complainant would have an opportunity to view the video too. And that's one of the things that we're looking at as far as the policy as to what exactly that will be. Are we going to do that? Are we going to let the complainant take a look at the video, the officer to take a look at the video, the investigator from internal affairs to take a look at the video? I have an opportunity, and I make a point every week to talk to the officers that have these cameras, and I ask them how it's going. Now, in every case, the officers have said that they have not had any instances where they wish they didn't have it, and there's been numerous times that they were so grateful that they had the camera. And we've had cases where a individual out in the field has wanted to speak to a supervisor. The supervisor has shown up on scene and has taken the complaint and reminded the individual that, the officer was wearing a body-worn camera, so everyone will be able to take a look at it. The internal affairs will be able to take a look at it. And we've had cases that the individual right then has withdrawn their complaint. So again, it's accountability. It's accountability for our police officers, but it's also accountability for the public too. We want people to come forward. If they have a complaint about our police department, we encourage them to come forward. I've said that repeatedly. Many of us have said that repeatedly. But and this camera is only going to help to show exactly what happened.
I know that the ACLU and some other groups had wanted folks, if they had an issue, to be able to potentially view the footage. Victor, can you talk about that? Being able to potentially have a person who has a concern be able to view the footage and why that might be important?
La Raza Lawyers joined with the Earl B. Gillum Bar Association to sponsor videos that were produced in English and Spanish by the chief and her spokesperson. And that was to encourage people to make reports. Once again, going to the accountability part of it, though, does the public know how many reports have come in? Does the public know what has happened to those reports? Does the public have any way to request that and trust that those numbers are going to be reliable? And I don't know the answer, but that's probably the second part to our joint effort that we had with the police department. And I forgot the second part of your question.
I had just asked basically if why you feel that it would be important to view that footage if somebody's making a complaint.
Sure. I want to pick up on what the chief said. You know, it's accountability for both the officer and the public, but unless the public knows what's going to happen, unless the public has some way to take that information and make it their own and use it, it diminishes the value of it. I think it's very important for people to make reports, but those reports have to be quantified. There has to be some kind of return to the public on it, and the police department and the union and their members are hamstrung in a way because there's something called the Police Officers' Bill of Rights, which really restricts what information can be sent out to the public. In other words, you can't call up and say, Officer Jones said this to me and it was very disrespectful. They can't then make a report back to that person saying this is what we did to Officer Jones. Those are confidential employment matters. So there has to be some kind of mechanism, and I'd really love to hear ideas. I've got my own ideas on how to do that, but there has to be some mechanism to get that accountability not just made, but really made part of what the public knows and what the public owns.
Lee Chawla, do you have anything to add on this topic?
I agree with all of the speakers. I mean, accountability is really important. I think you should be able to view the video, at least the complainant, as well as, you know, the police department, especially with internal affairs, or even if someone makes a complaint with the Citizens Review Board. But it would be nice if there was maybe a report given out once a year or quarterly, how many complaints they have received, and maybe whether it was discipline or what was the result of the complaint. Because it still has to be that the public has to be able to trust the police, that, you know, when they make a complaint or, you know, whatever happens, that there's going to be a result and there's going to be some type of accountability.
I want to talk about another sort of incident that's come up elsewhere. So the San Diego Police Department policy says that officers shall record in law enforcement situations like traffic stops or arrests. But what happens if an officer doesn't record when he or she is supposed to?
You know, it's very clear that the message has been sent. This is all about community trust and accountability. And that if an officer intentionally does not record a stop, then they're going to be subject to discipline up to and including termination. What we're finding is, talking to other police departments too, is that the, you know, it takes a little bit of training at the beginning. You got to get that muscle memory to remember to do it. This is something that's new. I mean, you know, I've been putting my radio on forever, and occasionally I still forget to put it on. But if it's intentionally that it was not recorded, or intentionally that recording went off, all of a sudden it was recording, then there's no recording. It's not easy or simple to just stop the recording. I mean, it has to be stopped by pressing that button for, you know, a couple seconds or so. So that would, I'm not saying it would not be impossible that it couldn't go off in a struggle, but it would be unlikely that it would. So that message has been sent very clear that, you know, once the training's over, once that muscle memory, you know, the officer has that they must and they shall record all enforcement contacts. And if we find an officer that intentionally does not do that, they are subject to discipline, including up to termination.
And the current version of the policy doesn't detail what might happen. And I think that that's something that the ACLU in particular may have brought up at some public meetings. Margaret, can you talk about that?
So it's not in this policy. There is a separate discipline policy. So, you know, for that reason, the department has explained to us that it's not said specifically here. I am heartened to hear the chief say that the message is clear to officers that they will be subject to sanction. It's going to be, you know, that will make the difference, or that will be a huge part of the difference. Will officers be held accountable for following the policy. One thing that could go in here that isn't in the policy is this, the point that you made, Lisa, is a good one, is how is this going to serve a public good if the public can't see the videos? And we have to strike that balance again between privacy and the public benefit. So what is really important here is that any instance of officers failing to comply, that we're not relying on happenstance to discover misconduct, but that there is actually regular auditing of officers' compliance with policy. And is that?
And one of the things that we're doing now, just to make sure, again, we're just rolling these out, just getting deployed, is that we are checking to, as an example, a sergeant would take a look and, let's just say they made 6 enforcement contacts that day. So they'll go and they'll take a look, and there should be a minimum of 6 of videos. And so we are making sure, doing some checks to make sure that, again, and it goes back to the training, especially early on, that they know, they have to do this. And we're taking this very seriously because it is all about the community trust.
Great.
Does anyone else have any comments about the sufficiency of the policy? Brian?
When we originally crafted this, we were definitely partners with the city and the department on crafting this policy. Our attorneys were actively involved in this process, so we're very happy with the end product that is currently being utilized by our department. Like I had stated a little bit earlier, the fact that this is something that we can review every 6 months or so, I think is an added bonus. We're very supportive of the chief's position on the discipline. We definitely want our officers to abide by all of the policies and procedures that the department's laid out. We don't want them to selectively choose which ones they're going to enforce and which ones we're not, because that really goes down to the community trust in the department. And I think that our department has done an exceptional job in reaching out to the communities and being partners with them via the community meetings that we go to. Chief Zimmerman goes to a lot of meetings. I think we go to 170 plus meetings throughout the city of San Diego. And as the police union, we're actually doing community meetings and meeting with the members there, talking about the issues that are facing our department. So I think the cameras overall are definitely going to add to the additional trust that I think that we have with the city and with the residents of the city.
As I mentioned, in some agencies there have been some issues with officers maybe not turning on cameras when they were supposed to. And in Albuquerque, there was an issue where the Department of Justice had found that many officers weren't turning on their cameras during all enforcement actions, and then there was actually, they were not getting disciplined for that. What sorts of, beyond what you've talked about, are there any steps, you mentioned potential audits, to make sure that beyond what you discussed, that officers are recording as needed?
I don't have anything additional except, I'll just go ahead and repeat what I said, is that we are doing spot checks, the sergeants on the officers, to make sure that it's being done correctly. Again, we're in the training mode. We're glad that other police departments are contacting us again, and that we're setting the national standard, the leader in this. And we want to be the leader in this. We want to get it right for community trust, because it is going across nationwide. We've been contacted by so many departments, small and large departments, and we're proud of the fact that we are, again, the largest department that are actually deploying them. And, the feedback, which is so great to hear, too, from the officers, is that they're glad they have them. They're saying it protects them, too. So that's why, of course, we still do the spot checks to make sure that it's being done the way it should be, and making sure that it's working the way it should be also at the end of the shift of uploading. And I'll just add to this is that, there's been questions that hasn't been asked yet, but, can you go in after and do something to the film? No, you can't. It's uploaded. It's what we call metadata, but it's basically, a lack of a better word, would be like a timestamp that you would be able to go and search exactly what that particular recording is on that enforcement contact. And then, it's unique to the officer with a password, and if anybody else accesses it, even the officer, again, that's timestamped. It's water stamped that it's on there that they went in there, and they can't delete anything from that or alter it. An investigator goes and takes a look at it, that would be timestamped, that they would know. If Internal Affairs takes a look at it, they would know that. If it's needed for court, they would know that. Citizens Review Board that will have an opportunity to view all of this. They will all of that, whoever looked at that, no matter if it's once or 20 times, that will be there.
Let's see here. I'm just going through. We've touched on a lot of different issues here. I know, Leitala, you have met with the police department numerous times, and Victor as well, after there were a swell of racial profiling concerns. Do you feel that the cameras are starting to help address some of those concerns that the community has?
I'm unable to say whether it's addressed it yet. I know that we still get complaints about racial profiling, and I don't know if the contact was with an officer, with the camera, but I think racial profile is systemic. It's not just in San Diego, it's all across the country, and that's going to end with better training, better recruitment, better cultural competency. And I think actually what the problem is, it's not that all police are racist, but the racism starts at such a younger age, and it has to be with education, even in second and third grade, that's where people are getting their views. So when they grow up, no matter what profession they go in, it's still there, and that's where it needs to start. It has to start younger than just when someone becomes a police officer, but we'll see whether or not the complaints go down or whether they go up.
Do you think that people in the community are aware that the officers are wearing cameras and that those have been deployed? Is there a large understanding that that's the case?
It's hard to say. I can look at the people that are here. I know that I sent out the information, went out to our membership, and of course then we have contacts with other groups who send out the information. And I know I see Dr. Warren here with Voice and Viewpoint, and I know he has reported on, and he will continue to do so. So we're doing the best, to get the information out, but I couldn't give you an exact, number.
Victor, in your experience, you have worked on cases where police camera footage has come up. Can you talk a little bit about how that footage came into play and what effect it had in criminal cases?
Well, sure. I've had several cases. The CHP has been using it for several years. Usually when you get they call it an MVARS dashboard camera. Usually when you get those, it's pretty easy to tell what the reason for the stop was. But I have had cases that have gone to trial where the critical part of the encounter was not video recorded. And you bring that up to a jury, and the jury just kind of nods its head and says, okay, so what? Sometimes they just don't even care. And I think that's a danger. Joining Leitala's comment, I think that racial profiling is not, it's definitely not restricted to the San Diego PD, it's not restricted to the CHP, it's not restricted to any law enforcement group. It is part of the culture, I think, but it's a small number. But those are the people that get the complaints. I get complaints every day of people calling me that said they were pulled over, they were treated badly by different agencies. And I never get calls from people that said, I heard about a cop that went to somebody's business that they knew they were in trouble with and gave them $100 out of their own pocket. And I know that stuff happens too. We don't hear about those. We hear about the problems. And that, unfortunately, is how the police agencies get stamped, which makes it even more a part of the culture of them versus us. And I'm hoping that the cameras will help the community understand what an officer goes through and help the officers understand what it looks like to the public, especially somebody who's never been in contact with the police and they're having an encounter where the police are trying to assert dominance and take control of a situation, which is often interpreted as I'm being harassed.
Well, I want to talk about one recent situation. Last month, there was a man in City Heights who had accused the police of assuming that he was a domestic violence suspect and pointing multiple guns at him. And he actually posted a video of it online, and it's gotten almost 60,000 views online. Chief Zimmerman, were police filming this incident too?
You know, the division that had that, I'm not 100% sure. There was quite a few officers on there. I'm not, I believe some of them may have had cameras, but I'm not sure at what point they were in there, if they were on the perimeter or if they were more of the officers that were discussing the situation with that individual. But we are thoroughly looking into that.
And how would footage like this be used if a citizen makes a complaint? And I believe this gentleman had said he planned to make a complaint if he hadn't already.
Well, we're looking into that, and with that video that's on there. And you know, one of the things too is that you're right, that was put on YouTube, and there's been a lot of instances that certain portions of film have been put on YouTube, and that's why we're glad again that we're going to be having our officers filming enforcement contacts, and we have what led up to it, the entire enforcement contact regarding that. And so again, you know, there's a lot of video that's out there, so this you know, is important for our officers to show from our perspective what's out there too. And I want to, you know, say this is that, you know, a lot of the comments that are here, and I'm pleased to hear these comments. Glad that we all agree that, you know, we're all glad that we have these cameras. That's great to hear. It's not going to replace community policing. I want that to be assured right here. Huge community policing philosophy. I'm completely, and our department's completely committed to community policing. It is more than 140 community meetings that we go to, formal, every single month, and that doesn't include, you know, parades or other festivals that we go to. And so we have a concerted effort to make sure that we reach out to the community in many different ways. This isn't going to replace that. I want to assure everybody, this is in addition to what we're already doing, and we hope to even do more.
Brian, what are the officers' thoughts on the cameras thus far? Have there been any issues that have come up with them?
We really haven't experienced too many issues. Most of the officers that I speak to are very supportive. They're happy to actually be wearing them. What I have found is the older officers are having a little bit more difficult time transitioning to the new electronics. I mean, it's just, we have officers on our department who literally have the old flip phones, and they only have that because you know, the little dialers, those phones are done. They don't make those anymore. The newer officers, they're much more tech savvy. They're definitely into the technology, and they enjoy it because not only do you get the little camera, you get like this little iPad of some sort that goes along with it to view the videos, and they can put the metadata information on there. So everybody that I've spoken to, they've been dealing with people, and sometimes the people are a little bit more disrespectful to them, but as soon as they point out that they're wearing their body-worn cameras, the whole demeanor of the contact changes, and next thing you know, they wind up being able to perform their police duties, and they move on, and nothing ever happens of it. So in that regards, I think the younger generation are much more adept at using the equipment, and I just think the older officers are just having a little bit more difficult time, but you know, it's going to be rolled out department-wide, so you just have to get used to it.
Chief Zimmerman, what are the rules for an officer's requirement to notify the public when a member of the public's being recorded?
They don't have to notify the individual, but if they ask, they, you know, should tell them that they're wearing it. But, you know, it's interesting, although they don't have to tell them, most of the officers are telling them, because like what Brian just said is that if an individual, let's just say was, you know, the demeanor wasn't the nicest toward the officer, we just have to remind them that, look, you know, everything you say and do is being recorded, as everything I say and do is being recorded. So they're using that many ways, and quite often, again, to de-escalate things that had happened before anything could happen. So it's a win-win for everyone.
And Margaret, I know that the ACLU publicly, both nationally and at a local level, has raised some issues with this. Can you talk about that? With notification.
Right. So again, our focus being on the accountability of the officer. So obviously, the department is focused on the sort of surveillance benefit, and our focus on the sort of government accountability piece is exactly to this point that I think we generally agree that people behave better when they're on camera, but you don't behave better if you don't know you're on camera. So one is people should know when they're being recorded, and two is that if the intention is to improve behavior, then even to further that purpose, people should be informed. We did recommend to the department that that officers inform individuals when they're being recorded. We even suggested maybe a little button or a pin, and the department chose not to do that. But I'm glad to hear that it's proven useful to make that notification, and so I hope that does become a practice.
Lechala, what do you think is appropriate in terms of notification?
I believe people should be notified so they know that they're being recorded. Then they also know if there's a problem later down the road that they know the whole incident was recorded. And so if they know that, they can, make a complaint and know that there'll still be that evidence there.
One thing that people should know is that the policy allows officers to record in your home. So, and I believe the notification still is that they won't inform you, but they will tell you if asked. So that's an important piece too, that we're not just talking about public recordings on the street, we're talking about recordings in people's own homes as well.
Victor, I know that you've also, as you mentioned, have had some experience in legal cases with these cameras. Has it ever come up where someone wasn't notified that they were being recorded and that came up as an issue?
Well, actually, I had a handled a case a couple of years ago at a checkpoint. It was interesting picking up on what Brian said about officers notifying the person being contacted. This was a camera that was just set down, pointed toward the window, and there was clearly one attitude of contact by the officer when they was contacted that was very aggressive. Roll your window down. Why do I have to roll my window down? Because if you don't, I'm going to break it. And then as soon as the young man held up the video camera, the officer's demeanor changed completely into, look, I asked you to roll your window down very nicely. So it goes both ways. The difference, though, is I think it always helps when the person knows that there's a camera there. People change their demeanor all the time. As the people that are running these cameras today can tell you, they're out there in the public, people act one way, but as soon as the camera turns on, they start acting another.
One question for Chief Zimmerman. Just in doing research for this panel and even before that, I have seen dozens of videos from different agencies with footage from police shootings or just regular contacts. I know that you have said that there is, obviously, we would want to make sure that maybe not every video gets out, but could we be seeing some videos coming out publicly on the news or on YouTube that have been taken by police officers?
You're talking about would the officer then release that? The officer
Yes.
is not. The officer will not release that video. That would only be released right now with my authority. Right now, we're not releasing any videos to the public. Would only be again with my authority right now.
Is it conceivable that that policy could change? You did say that you're in the process of every 6 months reviewing the policy.
I guess you'll say never say never. Is that, again, we want to make sure that we have the best policy. And I think I said earlier is that right now I don't have any plans to release it, but if it was for something for public safety, that is something even right now that I would consider to do. We're willing always to take input from everyone. We want to make it the most meaningful policy. Again, it's all about public trust, but that it makes sense for everything.
Brian, I know in some of the cases where the videos have been posted, it's been to the officer's benefit. Do you have an interest in maybe having some of that video be publicly released?
I would agree with the ACLU and the chief on this. I don't believe that we should be releasing the video, because then it winds up being salacious voyeurism. And I think it's inappropriate in certain circumstances that we're starting to release videos of traffic stops. Say you were late for work and you got pulled over, and this video is now public, in a public domain. You know, that's sort of a private encounter with the officer and the department. I don't think your employer or your friends or your family need to know that you were pulled over unless you're willing to let them know that happened. I know you bring up Albuquerque. Well, you know, state law in New Mexico actually forces the law enforcement to release all the videos. You know, one of our things that we've been trying to tell people is videos are not going to be the end-all to be-all. They're part of a puzzle. They're part of an investigation, and it's just a piece of an investigation, and we don't want people to jump to conclusions from seeing the videos. I can show you some videos of officer-involved shootings where you look at the officer who's actually shot the suspect, and you clearly think that the officer just executed this individual. But fortunately, there was another officer on the scene who had a different angle, and the person was actually shooting underneath his arm with a gun that this video, for the officer that was shooting, didn't catch. And those are the things that, you know, you only see one video and it turns into this mantra where, you know, this officer did something wrong, when in the grand scheme of things, after the investigation was done and some other video was shown, it was actually a good shoot because the officer was taking rounds from the suspect. So I don't think we should be releasing video unless, like the chief said, it's in the public good.
Late Chala, do you think that it makes sense to have the video be releasable through a public records request?
I think at this point, I would have to agree that it should not be released to the public or through a public records request unless, you know, public safety or there's a case or something that the public needs to know about, because I am a little bit concerned about, you know, privacy of individuals as well. And we talk about privacy there, but what about the privacy of witnesses? What if it's a domestic violence victim? You don't want that recorded, or someone, you know, child molest. So those are other areas, you know, that I'm concerned about as a citizen.
Victor, what do you think?
You know, I'm concerned about how videos being disclosed to the public would be used. In other words, you know, if you're going to be using video of an encounter inside someone's house, well, you know, people keep their houses in different states of repair and cleanliness. People keep different things in their houses. You know, there could be private things from your house disclosed to the public that you wouldn't necessarily do that. And, you know, I'm really thinking about the time of year we're at right now, where I can see a temptation, if there's public disclosure of videos, I can see a temptation of a neighbor maybe calling, of a politician running for office, calling the police saying there's a domestic violence dispute over there, having the police show up, go inside the house, and then, you know, in another few days that's available to the public. And if it affects an election, I just don't think that's the proper use of this. It is not the end-all be-all, like has been said previously.
Margaret, you had said that it may make sense in some situations. Can you give an example of a situation where you think that public release might make sense and be the right thing?
So the one that I was alluding to before is useful. So let's say that there has been some kind of encounter, maybe it's use of force, or maybe it's just some incident where the officer, it's a he said, she said situation. The officer has one story, the affected individual or individuals have another story, and tensions are flaring, or just, you know, there's a discrepancy there that has captured the public interest, and there's a desire to sort out what really happened. There's video available, so the department could choose to release video, again, because they believe that it shows the officer was in the right, and they can sort of set the record straight, or at least inform the public discussion about what happened. Alternatively, it could be that the officer was in the wrong, and so the department could choose to release that video to show that they are taking the community's concerns seriously, and they acknowledge that wrong was done, and they're you know, in the interest of transparency and public trust, they're releasing that footage so that, again, that can inform the public discussion. I think that's a good example of when release could be useful.
I do think that some members of the public would say that if the police officers are being paid by the public and we are expected to trust them, that it might make sense in some situations where there's accusations of police misconduct or an incident rises to a certain level, that it may make sense to publicly release it. Chief Zimmerman, can you think of any incident where it might make sense to release the footage, or at this point, are you thinking that it's inappropriate to release it in any case?
No, I think that's what I said earlier, is that right now we're not going to release anything, but there may be a situation that I'll make that decision to go ahead and release it. But privacy concerns, as we just spoke about, are very much that we care about the privacy of not just the officers, but also of the public. And there are a lot of checks and balances, as we spoke about, is that the investigator will have an opportunity to take a look at it. The Internal Affairs would take a look at it. The Citizens Review Board would be able to take a look at that. And there's checks and balances in there. But I did say if it's something that would be public safety, that it makes sense for us to release it for public safety, that is something I would absolutely consider.
Okay. Now I would like to open it up to public questions. I've gotten a lot of text messages and comments on Twitter, and so we want to have some of those questions brought in. The first question is, and this is for Chief Zimmerman, has a video from a body camera been used in a hearing yet?
And I'm not sure what you mean by hearing, but I heard a story last week that an officer was in court. The individual said that they did not do it. It was going to court, and the body camera was there, and they told the individual, okay, well, we're going to be able to show the body camera, and then the individual said, okay, I did do it. So I'm not sure if that's exactly what you're talking about, a hearing, but I just heard that story about a week ago.
Are there any other cases that you're aware of where footage has been used for any purpose thus far, that beyond just a criminal case, maybe even in a disciplinary case?
We do have some complaints that there are body-worn cameras, that the Internal Affairs are taking a look at that film, and it's going through that process, and then we'll go to the Citizens Review Board.
Brian, how do you think it makes sense to use the camera footage in disciplinary cases?
Well, I think it's going to be vitally important. Part of the policy is that the officer is able to review the video before he actually goes in to the Internal Affairs investigation. Our belief is that 99% of our officers are doing a good job out there, and then occasionally you run across some officers that don't necessarily abide by the policies and procedures of the department, or they live up to the community standards. And I can tell you, and I'm sure the chief agrees with me, we don't want those officers on our department. We want the best officers that are a reflection of our community, the reflection of the community's values, because we, as a department, represent the city. And that's why when we go to the community meetings, I stress the importance that this is a community issue. This isn't a San Diego PD issue. We need your help in recruiting officers from your community to want to be part of our department, so we get a very well diversified department. And that's not just us having to do that. That is you in the community leaders, the community members, to strive to find individuals that want to join our police department to make it the best that it possibly can.
I just want to add one more thing as we talk about trying to attract, recruit the very best officers and retain the very best officers. One of the things that we're considering right now is that because we're in such a huge hiring mode, you've heard me say many times that more than half of our police officers on patrol right now has 6 or fewer years on our police department, and at some commands that's closer to 70%. So we're in a large and a major training mode. So one of the things that I'm considering is that recruit comes out of the academy, and I'm glad to say that we have a graduation on Thursday. We need them. They're going to be going into field training. Is that to issue them the body-worn camera, and the field training officer can use that then on the contacts for training to say, hey, this was great. This is how you did it, and this is how you should do it. or this is how you need to improve. And it can be for anything from officer safety or for just their entire training mode as they go through the different phases of phase training. So I think there's a lot of different ways that we could use these body-worn cameras that is only going to make us a better police department.
So the second question, I would actually open this up to all of you. This person had asked, what if the tables are turned? If a citizen records on a phone or a dash camera, is that admissible evidence? Does he or she need to inform the officer that she's recording? Leichala?
I would say the citizen does not need to inform the police, and it is evidence. Evidence comes from, citizens, it comes from witnesses, and it would be admissible in court, once a person's able to lay a foundation. And if you're in public, you are able to record, and the police cannot take that away. The only thing I'm not sure about, though, if it was some type of evidence, but it does belong to the citizen, and you do have a right to record as long as you're in public. And that's why you see all these different videos, because the public knows that. And the first thing they do say, I'm recording you.
Yeah, I've had several cases where individuals are recording a contact that a client of mine may have had with a police officer, and then we find out later on that they have the video, and we're able to get that and then provide that to the other side, and it doesn't, it shows that the contact wasn't exactly the way the police officer said it happened. But, I also have seen a lot of videos that are, these are videos that are out there on the internet where someone is taking a video and then someone else is taking a video of them taking a video, and it captures the police officer telling the citizen, you can't videotape, or you can't videotape here, and tries to get them to turn it off and not record what's going on. So I see that one a lot too.
Brian and Chief Zimmerman, were there any uniform guidelines that the department looked at to try to come up with its policy for the cameras?
One of the interesting things is that we reached out to a lot of other police departments, and most of them didn't have a policy, or they were developing their policy. We looked at the CHP's policy. We've looked at other policies that other departments had. We sought input from community stakeholders on this, and what we've been told is that we have one of the more comprehensive policies, but I think, as everybody said, is that's why we have that we're going to review it every 6 months or so. And there's probably things that we didn't even think about right now. That even though we have a great panel here, there's probably something that may come up that we go, God, we didn't think about that. And that's why I think it's important that we continually view this as a living document to make it as strong as we can.
I know when we originally went into negotiations with the city, we reached out to a lot of associations throughout the United States. Some of them were just on the cusp of creating a policy. Some had some policies in place. Also, we have the International Associations of Chiefs of Police. They actually have a model policy that they created for review. There's the Police Executive Research Forum. They've also developed a policy, and there's some labor attorneys throughout the United States who have developed policies. So there's a lot of policies out there, and I would surmise at some point in the future, maybe the state of California will probably generalize all of the policies, which each department will probably have to abide by. But I think that'll have to go through a thorough vetting through the legislature and also through law enforcement and all of the community stakeholders throughout the state.
Chief Zimmerman, you had said that obviously there would be a review process every 6 months. Have there been any things just starting out with your policy that may need some tweaking?
Yeah, definitely. Some of the things, again, that we're going to take a look at is one of the things that we spoke about was, we don't generally would interview someone, as far as child abuse, and we still wouldn't do that, but as the evidence of, as you're walking around the house, is what are you actually seeing? Are you seeing the house is in disrepair? There is no food in the house. There is maybe an insect infestation. in there. No bed, no food, no formula. So those are things that we're looking at because, again, for evidence for the case of the child abuse. So those are some things, again, that we didn't necessarily, I think of as the officers are out there going to, as you've, I think, heard me say, we get about 1.2 million calls into our communication center every year. So as we go out on these calls, how best can we use the camera for evidence and, again, for public trust? So, that's great film right there to show exactly what that officer is seeing on why maybe they did what they did.
One of the questions that one of the members of the audience asked was, will the Citizens Review Board have access to the footage if they request to investigate certain complaints?
Well, the Citizens Review Board, as part of, they get a full, they have an opportunity to look at all the investigation, which would include this.
And I guess I would also ask what Margaret, what your group thinks about the Citizens Review Board and their ability or what their role should be in reviewing those complaints and videos that are associated with them.
Well, certainly the video should be part of any review that they do. As the chief mentioned, this should be included in the material that they review. I think, well, I'll just leave it at that.
I did have the opportunity, I think it was last April or May, to attend a Citizen Review Board hearing. And I was actually quite impressed with their work. I had been under the impression that they were just a rubber stamp. But after having them, they did attend a couple of our community forums to inform our communities, what their work was. But I was actually impressed with them, and I think more people should learn about them, and in fact, more people from the community should try to become a member of the Citizens Review Board, and I believe right now they are recruiting. And it's easy to be on the outside and say someone is not doing something right, but I think if you start attending the hearings, if you start joining them, you have a different opinion. My only complaint is that the Citizens Review Board does not have subpoena powers.
Victor, do you have anything to add?
Not really.
One question that a member of the audience had was, how would you handle malfunctioning cameras? What if the police department perhaps says that a bunch of cameras have been malfunctioning? How can the public verify that cameras actually stopped working as opposed to not being turned on?
Yeah, and thanks for that question. Again, it's critically important for the public trust, and so that's why one of the things we're doing the spot checks, the sergeants, to make sure that, say, if you had 5 enforcement contacts, that there's actually 5 pieces of video there. We've had a couple cameras that didn't operate. Then we returned them to the company. They immediately replaced them. But that's going to be very telling. If that same officer has malfunctions, that's going to be a huge red flag for us. And then we will take appropriate measures to make sure that the camera is functioning as it should. But, and I get the question, it's to, again, can an officer manipulate it? Can the officer, say that it was turned off? Can the officer do this? We're taking great pains, as, Brian and I have said, is that we care very deeply for the reputation of our police department, and we are not going to let a few officers discredit, dishonor our badge and our profession. We're not going to tolerate it, because the very vast majority of the officers go out there every day wanting to make a positive difference every single day, and we're just not going to tolerate that misbehavior.
And one question that someone had asked was, how long will the videos be kept? For how long, and where and what protections are there for that video?
Yeah, thanks for the question again. The video right now will, and it's not a one-size-fits-all, it will depend. It will be kept as forever long of the underlying report is. So as an example, let's say it's a traffic warning. I think generally traffic warnings are kept for 6 months now, so the video will be kept for 6 months, unless, let's say, a complaint comes in. So if a complaint comes in, then that video will be kept until the conclusion of the complaint. Or if it's, again, somehow in that video it was evidence that, let's say the officers, saw the camera captured the individual throwing a gun out the window or throwing, narcotics out the window or something that it became evidence. So it will be kept for however long that underlying report is, but there could be exceptions too, like I just said.
And another question that had come up on Twitter was, is there facial recognition software included in any of this body camera technology?
No, I don't believe so. No, no.
Yes.
Just to add to the equipment, I mean, part of this agreement is that per our MOU, we have a labor management committee meeting every quarter with the department. We talk about the equipment and the equipment failure. That's going to be also incumbent upon us as the union to make sure that this equipment is functioning properly. Some of the concerns we addressed during negotiations was how effective is equipment, what's the breakdown ratio, plus the storage of the video. Because what happens is you store it for a while, it's considered active storage, and then after a certain amount of time, it goes to cold storage. We're a large department. If we started videoing an entire 10-hour shift, we're talking about thousands of hours of video a day. And that amounts to a lot of storage at the end of the year. And it's a little bit cheaper to go into cold storage. Some of the issues that we have had regarding is the downloading of the video. We had an officer where he put his body camera into the device that downloads the video, and it took 48 hours. Because his camera was downloading, he didn't go out with the body camera, but I don't think that should count against him in the fact that the technology is not working properly. And that's something that we'll actively work with the department to make sure that we have the resources on hand to where if we do have malfunctions, then there are extra body cameras at the division or they can go down to headquarters to get it. But I don't think we're going to be at that point at this time because we're so early in rolling it out.
Yeah, one thing that we talked about as far as the uploading and downloading of the film, why we're doing this incrementally is that the infrastructure at our divisions was lacking. That's why they needed to upgrade. I'm not going to say it was as bad as dial-up, but it wasn't much better in some cases. So we, working again with the city to put the infrastructure in so we didn't have officers that, they could have their body-worn cameras, and that if an investigator needed to go take a look at that film, that it didn't take a very long time because that wouldn't be very efficient. So we rolled them out. At first we tested about 10, and then we rolled out about 25 at each division, and then incrementally went out to about 75 at each division till now that we have 300 at each division. And we're working on the infrastructure upgrades of those other divisions right now so we can be ready to go with that. So we're doing this very methodically, making sure it works, putting checks and balances in place for all these questions that have come up. So I appreciate the questions.
Leichala, you also had a question, I believe.
Okay, I'm not sure if it's appropriate. I did notice that there is an officer in the last row. My question is if he's wearing a body camera. Oh, okay. I just thought maybe if he could show it to us, but.
One person had asked, do officers turn on cameras as they try to initiate a traffic stop?
The policy is that they will be turned on for the enforcement stop. So as the officer makes a decision to make an enforcement contact, that's when it has to go on. And then the good thing is that what we talked about is that it's in a buffering mode for 30 seconds. So once you make that decision to put it on, it buffers for the 30 seconds. So you actually capture those 30 seconds of video leading up to that enforcement contact, and then audio and video of the investigation.
Another person had asked, is there some system, I know you had talked about doing some audits of the cameras themselves and also just making sure that officers are recording, but someone had asked, what if no complaints are being made? Is there a system to check officers' cameras to ensure that they're not, I guess they're looking for more details on the system for checks and balances of this.
Yeah, and if I understand the question, will we randomly just pick an officer without a complaint and view the camera? No, we won't do that. We don't have plans to do that. But again, we make sure that that film is there by taking a look at it. The sergeant, making sure on spot checks that it's there. But if the officer doesn't get a complaint, we're not going to view thousands of hours of video. We don't have plans to do that.
Brian has a comment.
That's a good point, and that was one of the things that we were concerned about. I can tell you, I also teach at the police academy, and one of the courses I teach is EVOC, which is the driving of the police cars. I did my initial training in Sacramento, and unfortunately, the Sacramento PD they have the cameras inside the cars, and their supervisors actually do view all of the video from these officers, and they get disciplined for that. And I don't know if that's necessarily appropriate. I think if you're going to use it for an officer safety feature, probably wouldn't be so bad. But I even know that the ACLU brought this up because what now becomes you're viewing this officer's contact, and let's say the officer was inside a house or something, now does this supervisor who's viewing this officer see something that the officer missed, and now we're going to open an investigation on that. And I think that goes back to the privacy issue of where if the officers aren't getting the complaints and they're doing a good job, why do we want to waste man hours to sit down at a screen to monitor to make sure these people are doing their job? And also now they're surveying everything that we've recorded over time, which becomes, I think, a big issue that the ACLU would probably have.
Yeah, so the ACLU, for both the officers and the individuals, the civilians being recorded, we don't want the department doing fishing expeditions. So we don't want them reviewing video in your house or of a stop, looking for potentially other criminal activity that, any kind of, to look to see if there's anything else that can be charged against you. Similarly, officers should not be facing fishing expeditions that are suspicionless of just supervisors looking for opportunities to discipline. However, at the same time, you do want some kind of random review, not necessarily, not by the officer supervisor, but by an audit, an entity within the department or outside the department that's looking for specifically whether officers are complying with the policies around use of the body cameras.
Lechala or Victor, do you have any thoughts on how that should work?
I don't have anything to add.
Well, I think it's that whole issue is part of what we've kind of touched on here, but I think it's a big component of this, and that's what is the training. I know that you're going to be doing, I think you said you're going to be doing training, and that's probably for the officers that are coming online. But once you've trained, what is the accountability factor again? What, spot checks, okay, but I think Margaret had a good point. There has to be some kind of check, because we are talking about raising the community trust and raising the transparency so that if the community knows that it's not just the cop's supervisor who is checking, but there is a 6-month audit or a yearly audit of those videos, that goes, I think, to ensuring that there's proper usage of the videos.
I think those are all really good points. One of the things that we do on every 18 months, we go to advanced officer training. We're required by the state of California to, every 18 months, we do training on perishable skills. But during that time, this is when the department takes the opportunity to, if there are issues that have arisen that need to be addressed. So regarding the training component, this could be something that could be done at AOT, which is Advanced Officer Training, on an 18-month basis, where officers that are actually using the body cameras could get a refresher on the policies, considering that this will be updated or possibly updated every 6 or so months. So that reassures that the training is continuous throughout the department to make sure that even officers that don't have to put the cameras on, they should be well aware of this policy, because there may be times when they're in the field and the officers around them have the body cameras on. So that is something they need to be aware of. And I've spoken to officers who have actually shown up on scene, you know, and they were dealing with their issues, not realizing that they were also being on camera in the performance of their job, because even though they weren't wearing one.
Actually, I have a question for you, Brian. The question was, are cameras used for officer evaluations, job evaluations, and should they be? And are officers concerned that supervisors will abuse cameras to punish officers that they don't like?
You know, good question. We don't support that right now, based on the way the current policy is. I'm sure maybe down the road that may be used as a training tool. I know Chief Zimmerman had talked about giving it to our trainees out there to evaluate their officer safety tactics and their contacts. I think that's a great training tool. The way it's currently set up, they're not used in evals in the way the officer performs their duty. I think it goes back to what we had discussed a little bit prior about the fishing expeditions. So in that regard, we wouldn't be that supportive of that at this moment.
Do you have any comments, Chief Zimmerman?
You know, we work very closely with the Police Officers Association, and, you know, we're in agreement with all of this. We want, again, the very best for our community, for our police department. And again, I'm glad that, you know, we are going to take a look at the policy, but I agree that how we have it now is that we're not going to just randomly go without a complaint and take a look at the video of an officer. We encourage people to come forward. We continue to say that. If you have a complaint, come forward. I think that goes to the trust that we trust our officers. At the same time, we trust the community, and we're all working together. And if we find something on there that, you know, that shows that the officer has misconduct, then we are going to, as we spoke about with our discipline manual, take action.
You know, it's one of the things that I should have added in here too is that you know, we have supervisors, and they have the officers that are actually working out on the patrol. You know, if you start to use the video as a tool for evaluating your officers, then does that lull the supervisors into a false sense of security because they're sitting at a computer watching video of an officer perform, versus actually being out in the field mentoring these officers on the way our police department does policies and procedures, making sure that the officers, they're seeing it firsthand that they're performing their jobs. I think that's a slippery slope to go down, because you may get supervisors that don't really get out of the substation because they're viewing so much video. You know, if you have a squad of 6 officers, you know, that's hours of video that they're having to watch to base their performance eval on, when they could rather spend that in the field on a hands-on mentoring those officers. I think I wouldn't think that would be a good idea.
You know, one of the things, and it's already in the policy, that we talk about for a sergeant to be able to view the video with their squad for training purposes. But that's a different, you know, is what we're talking about by looking at hours of video. As I said before, is that some of the commands, you know, closer to 70% of the officers has 6 or fewer years on the department. It's critical for that sergeant to be out there, those senior officers to be out there mentoring, directing their activity, assisting them in their duties, you know, because of the variety of calls that we go on. You know, it's really, you know, we have to do so many different things out there. And so again, the point of the camera is for community trust. You know, we keep saying that regarding it, and I don't think we can say it enough on how important that is. But again, the camera is another component of that community trust, but that face-to-face interaction is also extremely important, and that's not going to go away.
I have a question for Margaret. The ACLU in the past had raised some concerns about turning on the cameras only during an enforcement contact. Is this still a concern, and why?
Yes. So the policy says that the officers shall record, or I think shall record, law enforcement encounters, and that goes to the question of consensual contact. So there's this category of interaction with the public described as consensual contact that the public doesn't always feel like or understand is consensual. So the question is, does the policy cover the majority of instances or enough of the instances where people feel that they are being where we have complaints or hear concerns about racial profiling or disrespectful treatment, will those be captured on video under the current policy? Now, the current policy does include consensual contacts that are performed or sort of with the purpose of developing probable cause or reasonable suspicion. Thank you. So that includes a good number of consensual contacts. Does it include enough to capture those instances where people describe having felt disrespected? So, and it's an open question. I mean, what the ACLU would love is for every contact with the community to be recorded. That way, there's no question that the officer is selectively deciding what to record, that it's that they should record everything except their break time when they go to the bathroom. I understand that's there are some practical limitations with that in terms of data storage, but really, so it really boils down to what's the right balance. So this is where the department's starting. It's certainly good that they're including some forms of consensual contact, and I hope that sooner rather than later, we get a sense for whether that's capturing those interactions that people describe as troublesome.
Along with the ACLU, the NAACP, we did start meeting with Chief Lansdowne in early January, and then when he retired with Chief Zimmerman, but there was a policy change that now on the initial contact with citizens, the first question out will not be, are you on probation or parole? That's where we normally get most of the complaints, and unfortunately, they ask the questions in the minority communities and not in the larger communities, and that they would also eliminate curb setting, unless it was for officer safety or they would, articulate another reasons such as flight risks. Because
can you explain quickly what curb sitting is for those who may not
know?
know?
Curb sitting, if they stop someone or traffic, they take them out of the car and they make them sit on the curb. And a lot of people find that humiliating. People are driving by like, oh, I wonder what that person did. And so just so you're not in view of the public, I mean, if they need to, they can put you in a police car, but there's really no need to curb set unless, to be able to articulate a real reason, and they would have to put that in the report why they made someone sit on the curb.
There was a question here. Are there any statistics on camera models used by the police department or any police department that show whether complaints went down?
Yeah, there are a lot of, I think Rialto had it's one of the departments that comes to mind that had more than 80% of complaints reduction. And I think other police departments have seen reductions also. So we anticipate that is going to happen. And one of the things too, at the end of last year, there was a report that I think I had mentioned that unfortunately was not a good statistic, is that our officers led in assaults on our officers were assaulted more than other officers in the area. Remember that was at the report? And so we're hopeful too that will be reduced, that the public will see that our officers are wearing a camera, and then again, their conduct toward our officer will be greatly improved. So we hope that statistic goes down, that our officers don't lead in having assaults against them. So we're hopeful for both.
Generally, have you had much feedback from residents about cameras? Brian, when officers are out and about, are they hearing from members of the community about the fact that they're being recorded?
It's so new right now to our department that I think a large swath of the community really doesn't realize which officers have it. I know some of the divisions do have it, some of the divisions don't. I tell my officers in all circumstances to perform their job as if they're being recorded. I mean, anybody who has a phone literally has either a camera or video recorder on them. So from that perspective, we law enforcement in general has been recorded for many years. Now law enforcement is actually carrying recording devices to enter into those contacts. So I think as the program is rolled out in its entirety over the next year and the continuation of this year, I think more people will be more adept in understanding that we are wearing body cameras. I also am looking forward to see the research that is done regarding complaints and use of force. You know, we have about 100 officers that are on light duty at any given time on the department because they're injured in the performance of their job. And to even have a quarter of those officers not there because of what they've done in the line of duty is just adding to our staffing that we're currently understaffed. So I think it's a bonus for everybody.
You know, one of the best things and greatest things about being the chief of police is that I've had the opportunity to go speak to community members from throughout our entire city, and I ask that question. Even if they don't come to me, I ask that question, what they think about our officers wearing body-worn cameras, and it's uniform that they all say that they think it's a good idea for the public trust, and glad to hear, too, that our officers are saying the same thing, is that they're glad to have it. I think I had mentioned that there's been the officers that I've spoken with, 0 instances where they wish they didn't have it, and there's been numerous instances where they were grateful that they did have it. So it's a win-win for everyone.
Margaret, Lechala, Victor, have you heard anything from community members about the police officers having cameras and what they think about it?
Not a thing, actually, and I'd really like to, so please let us know.
I have not.
I haven't come across anybody who's mentioned that their contact with the police officer was being recorded yet, and it's pretty new. But I can say that after the policy changed that Lechala mentioned about curb sitting and the questions to be asked immediately, that just anecdotally, I can tell you I don't get those calls anymore. I haven't received one call probably since the summer complaining about that. And in my own travels throughout the community, I haven't seen it. I don't, at least, you know, the times that I've been through there.
One last question. A person had asked, in light of having some footage of police brutality and police officers potentially shooting unarmed citizens, will the San Diego Police Department change any policies or training as a result of this video or these videos? And do you think that video footage will lead to more prosecutions and stronger punishment of police officers that act outside the law?
If I understand the question, it's, will again I release that video of that? And again, if it goes to the overall public safety of, to release that video, then that's likely something that I would consider to do that. But right now, we're not releasing any video, but to release that, to show the public what actually occurred, that is something that I will, you know, consider for the public safety of everyone.
Can you define what you mean when you say for the public safety? What kind of criteria you're thinking of when you talk about that?
I think everybody, you know, has been viewing what's going on in Ferguson and other cities. And but let's just talk about Ferguson. Is that, you know, they're seeing, you know, the property damage, assaults that are going on there, and you know, so I think the public wants information on exactly what happened. And so if you take a situation like that and that body-worn camera can tell exactly what happened, then that's would be something that is very positive, because right now in that situation, nobody really knows what happened. And so I actually wonder what would happen if there was the officer or somebody had a body-worn camera to show exactly what happened. So that's what I mean about public safety, is that if there was an incident that, you know, it makes sense for the public safety to put it out there as to whatever the video shows, then that is something that I would definitely consider.
Lechala, you had a question, comment?
Yeah, my only concern about the body cameras, as they're sort of alluding to, you can see what happened, but then sometimes the law enforcement still puts a spin on it. I mean, if you can remember Rodney King, it was clear what happened, but they put a spin on it and officers were acquitted. And, you know, we had the case of the CHP officer beating that Marlene Pinnock, And that was where they did fire him, but because that one was so clear. But just recently we had one where the guy was reaching for his wallet. The officer shot him, and of course the officer said, that's not what you see, that's not what happened, and it was clear it was there. So you can always claim that it doesn't capture the whole picture, but at least it's a start, and I do think it will help, the public trust and hopefully the relationship between law enforcement and especially the minority communities will improve.
I have to ask Chief Zimmerman, so you described the situation in Ferguson. Obviously, we would never wish that something like that would occur here. But if we had a situation like what had occurred between Officer Darren Wilson and Michael Brown, would the San Diego Police Department have released that footage of that incident?
I will tell you, as the chief of police, I would likely have released that film.
And why is that?
Again, it goes to what we're seeing, what's happening in Ferguson, continue to happen in Ferguson. And I think putting that out there again for public safety, to have that open and honest dialogue as to what that is, what is occurring, I think is very important. And that's why, I have to say is that we're so fortunate here in the city of San Diego to have these discussions, to be able to talk through any issues that we have. We've made modifications. I'm so glad to hear that you haven't had any complaints of that, because we worked really hard with the NAACP, the ACLU, on that policy, on that training bulletin, and got that out to the officers about asking if you're on probation or parole, or the sitting on the curb. So thank you for giving me that feedback. I'm going to bring it back to our officers because it's important, too, that they know that it's making a difference. And so thank you for saying that. So again, it goes back to just having a great community relations. And as we talked about, more than 140 formal community meetings that we go to a month. Doesn't include the fairs, the festivals, the block parties that we go to, and other events. And we have to continue to work with all communities. So if something happens, that we stand together as a police department, as one community, again, because we want the very best thing. We want to provide the very best police services possible in a fair and a partial manner, and that's what the community wants us to do too. So it's important to continue with all these community relations, so if something happens, that we stand together as the community, and they have that trust knowing that the right thing will be done.
Well, thank you to our panel for participating tonight. We really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us all about the cameras and the policies for them. And again, thank you to Lincoln High School for being our willing host tonight. It's a great venue, and we appreciate all of you coming out as well. Have a great night.